been good. You know, we've gone through our process with our roster, kind of going through it in detail, position prototype, you know, discussions with the coaching staff, just kind of how Greg's built his defense in the past, kind of what we've done on offense, the kind of players that we're looking for, who fits, who are we kind of still in the gray area with, and then really after that, just free agency-wise, where do we go from there? I mean, that's the beauty part about hiring a guy that's been around for a long time. He's done multiple things over his career. You know, he's been both in the 3-4, 4-3. I mean, the majority of snaps are nickel defense anyways. You know, but, you know, sticking with that, our base being a 3-4 defense, and the reasoning behind that of trying to keep as many of the players that are currently here that understand that style of defense is key for us, to where now we're not completely starting over. We can keep a lot of the guys we already have.
Adam, looking back at your time in Miami, what went right, what went wrong?
Oh, we didn't win enough games. I appreciate you bringing this up right away.
I'll wait a little bit.
We didn't win enough games. I think there was a lot of good stuff. We had some opportunities at the end of the seasons the last 2 years, and we didn't win a game after we beat New England both those years. So, you know, that probably didn't help us. You know, didn't take advantage of opportunities we had. I don't know. I didn't read any. I didn't see or read anything. So I kind of had other things I had to worry about.
Was that a point of contention at the time that they were going to this year, and you were all right with that?
I don't know all the details of that. We didn't have that kind of conversation. I mean, we had a good talk after kind of our original conversation. We talked for probably 20 minutes. It was a good conversation, and then I had to go to that team meeting and tell the guys kind of where it was going from there.
Since you haven't had a chance to talk to you since you put together your staff, because you hadn't had a background with Greg, so what about the initial interaction?
Well, I've had a little bit of background just knowing him over the last since 2009. You know, it's kind of worked out the right way. His name had been brought up to me quite a few times when I was in Miami. I know after VJ left for Denver, his name was brought up quite a bit. I think I have a unique relationship to where we've known each other for a long time. We've competed against each other quite a few times, and I try to bring that up as much as possible. Not the games that he beat us in, the ones that he lost. So, but just being familiar with his system, how he does things, how he operates, and a lot of the guys that he's been with over time, I think there's a lot of lines of connection there.
And also just to follow up on that, it became a headline when you hired Joe and Greg. Obviously, they had that background, the whole value. So what gives you the confidence, the comfort level that's behind it?
Well, Joe's the one that's recommended Greg to me multiple times, and those two guys are close, and you know, just watching those two guys get work together again, I think they're both excited about that. I know Joe is. I think some of his best years were with Greg, and vice versa. So I think both those guys are excited to get back together. They speak a common language, and they're both trying to do the same thing. That's win.
Adam, do you feel like you need significant offensive upgrades?
I think really for us, it's a third of our roster were free agents, and that's a pretty high number. You know, I mean, I think this is a unique situation for a new coaching staff, to where you can look at our roster and on the surface it looks like we have a good amount of needs, but really it's going to be about who are we re-signing to start, and then a lot of those needs get plugged in there, and then entering free agency in the draft. I think we're going to be able to really balance out our roster the way we want to. It's going to be about really who's available, kind of how we can put this thing together going forward. I like a lot of the players that we already have after evaluating them. I think Sam's really done a good job of getting better as the season progressed. Watching last year, and when he was injured and then came back from that, I thought he really made a jump there. And really, when you have that position to where he can make other players better, I think, you know, our wide receivers and the same, those two guys together, they play well together. I think they got different different abilities, different skill set there. So now it's about adding to that group.
Whenever you evaluate some of these players on offense, you said which two wide receivers do you need?
I'm talking about Robbie and Quincy.
About your evaluations of the others, what have you seen out of Chris Herman when you do his review, and also Elijah?
Yeah, I think Chris is unique. I don't think you find a lot of tight ends that are able to be on the field all 3 downs. He can obviously, he's a very good receiver. He's very good in the run game, and he did a really good job in pass protection last year. You know, he's a unicorn type player where you don't see a lot of these guys that can do all 3 phases of the game. And when you have a guy like that, now you're able to, if you need to implement a guy that's a blocking tight end or another receiving tight end, you have some flexibility there because he covers a lot of ground there. And I think he helps those other guys that are there, the receivers, to where people have to account for him, and that may dictate some different coverages. Elijah, watching him, I was very impressed. I thought, you know, he only got to play a certain amount of games there towards the end of the year, and I think his first game was against us. You know, we have some things that, after kind of watching that, I know there's some things that he likes to do over other run schemes, and we're going to try to emphasize what he likes to do, what he feels good about doing, and really develop that. I think it's helpful. It's helpful. It's probably easier for me looking at the defense. I mean, I've been looking at defense for 3 years, and now it's more of trying to get caught up with the offense, which that makes it a little bit easier for me. You know, just knowing the players on the other side, how tough every game that we played them was. I don't think there was ever a time where I felt great going into a game of, hey, we're gonna be able to do whatever we want. We always were challenged by this group on defense. I know it was tough to run the ball. Some of our numbers looked better than what it was. You know, a lot of our rushing stats came at the end of the game where we hit a couple big plays. But for the most part, it was always a challenge, you know, whether it would be passing the ball or running the ball. You know, I feel like this is something that this was brought up, you know, in all those interviews. We had to do that first time that I had to do this, where he was always very challenging for us to go against. We'd always account for him. We'd try to double him, and he was hard to stop. We basically could not run the football because of him, and he was always very disrupted in our games. We struggled versus him in pass protection as well. He's very disruptive. You know, for me, I never look at the sack numbers. I'm always going to look at pass disruption. How many hits on the quarterback does he have? How many pressures does he have? And then you throw in the sacks. You know, now your number is going to look the way you want it. And, you know, a lot of times when you have a defensive lineman that's causing all kinds of pass disruption, you're going to get interceptions, you're going to get fumbles, you're going to get quarterbacks making the wrong decision a lot of times. And I think he does a good job of disrupting the quarterback. What's that? Yeah, I think that's why you got the GM coming up here pretty soon. I think that's a better question. That's a better question for him.
How does he fit in schematically with Greg's defense?
Oh, he fits in very well for us. I mean, what Greg has planned for him and the multiple things that he likes to do with players, he's going to fit in our defense just fine. We're not going to label him as one thing. Like I could see him playing multiple spots.
Outside of the obvious, you could change one thing about your time there.
I don't know if there's just one thing. I think there's some situations that I look back on, and maybe if we would have handled a little different and went a different direction, maybe something works out different. But I mean, it doesn't matter now.
Adam, when you evaluated this roster, was there any player that stood out to you that maybe you didn't ever look at beforehand, or maybe a surprise guy that
I don't think I knew as much about Robbie. After watching him, I was very impressed with how his speed. I mean, it's unique. You don't see a whole bunch of guys that have what he has, and the way he tracks the ball down the field. I don't think I've ever been around a player that does it as smooth. He is so smooth that when he sticks his hands out and at the speed he's running, you see him just pluck the ball and just keep on going. And, you know, we're just going to keep trying to think of ways to get him the ball, ways to create variety in his routes, you know, and try to, instead of just doing one or two things, maybe we can open that thing up to 5, 6, 7 things to where he's a threat on multiple levels, whether it be underneath, intermediate, or down the field. I think we've done it multiple ways. Really, it comes down to who's on your roster, what type of players you have, what are their strengths, and that's really what we're going to do is adjust the offense to that. So I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with this, but we can do we have the option to do what we need to do with the players that we have.
Coach, your offenses have been tight end friendly in the past. What type of player do you think Chris is that's found good for you, and what is his upside?
Yeah, he was a guy that we evaluated, extremely hard in Miami because we were looking for a tight end, and we actually were looking for more than one, and he fit that mold of what we were looking for. I think him coming to New York was, was good for me at the end of the day because I go back, I see a guy that what he was in Miami and what I saw on tape last year, I saw a lot of improvement. I see a guy that's complete player. He's only going to get better from here, being a factor in all three phases of pass protection, run game, and as a receiver, it's exciting to really, whenever we get a chance to get going with him, we'll be able to do a lot of things with him.
Adam, what's the dynamic like to believe you have your quarterback in place in this offseason to have the draft picks and to take over money in free agency to build around it?
I think it's a good starting point. Everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's trying to make sure that they have, whether it be a young quarterback moving forward or really that position solidified. You never want to be that team that's looking for a guy, and it's tough. It's not an easy thing to find, and the fact that coming in, everybody was excited about it, and then he had the year he had last year where you saw improvement throughout the year. You saw a guy that went through some tough times where goes down with an injury, has to come back, got a chance. He really got the ideal situation to where he was able to take a step back, watch, and then go back in without, making any kind of change at quarterback. I know at the time he probably hated it that he was hurt, but it was probably really good for him. And now moving forward, he knows things that he's going to want to work on, and then we're just going to keep trying to progress from there.
Adam, what's your evaluation of Darren Lee, both what you've seen on film and then he's coming off the suspension in the season?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times when we would play this team, he was always getting beat up by you guys a lot of the times, and he would play a great game against us, and we would have problems blocking him. We would have problems making sure he was accounted for. He would do a good job in coverage. I think he's a type of player that has a lot of the things that you're looking for that position. I think he has position flexibility, and really it's going to be about, for us, it's always going to be about getting your hands on guys, and April 8th on, see how guys fit in, see how really this whole thing comes together. It's hard to do when you watch tape, but when you don't get to really be around guys, when you don't get to interact with them, you don't get to do meetings with them, you're not on the field, really that's where a lot of our evaluation comes into play.
Take a couple more.
Free agency, you obviously not got an opportunity to sit down and talk to the players you want to bring in.
Right.
How difficult is it to make sure you got the guy that you have to be
I think a lot of times what happens is some of the guys that are in free agency may be the guys that have been on previous teams or other guys on the staff have worked with them, and they're not as expensive or not the high dollar guys that really try to build your locker room kind of through that. And then when you do get an opportunity with a guy that's more of a high profile guy, you have to go off of what you know. You have to go off of your relationships around the league. You do a lot of investigating on guys, and you do the best you can to evaluate that stuff. That's where front offices have to do a great job to make sure that the guys that we bring in are the right type of guys.
Adam, have you had any conversations with Ryan Tannehill since you left Miami, and if he does become a free agent, is that maybe a player you would have interest in?
Yeah, we've had a couple of conversations, but it was more when I first left, and since then I haven't really spoken to him. I know, when he hits the offseason, he'll disappear for a while. So I'm not, the free agent stuff, or if he becomes available, that's just something that I'm not in that spot yet.
Would you like Josh McCown back as your number two?
That's something that has come up quite a bit, and I was able to at least speak with him briefly when I first got to town. He just happened to be around, and I'm trying to give him some distance because it's a tough when you get up there in age and your family. I mean, he has older kids that are playing high school sports, and you know, that's a tough decision for him to make, whether or not he wants to be away from his family still or does he want to come back. So trying to give him some space right now and really kind of play off of him, see what his decision is.
Coach, what's your impression of Chris Herndon?
That's the third Chris Herndon question.
Okay, what about Quincy Enunwa?
I've been very impressed with what I've seen. Obviously, he had a lot of good games against us. He was physical. You know, he's the type of guy that you just want to get the ball in his hands. You really don't care how you do it because his physicality as a runner is unique. I don't think you see a guy with that kind of size that can do what he does. I mean, he's a big guy for a wide receiver. You almost don't realize it, and especially when you see him on the field in person, you realize this guy can be a factor in a lot of different levels. You know, really for us, it's going to be about just the variety of the routes that we try to do with him, just kind of see how far he can take that, you know, give him all those options and let him sort it out, and we'll do what's best with him during the season.
Adam, do you think you need to improve the offensive line?
Well, right now, I mean, we really have two holes there because we don't have anybody there, you know, free agency. So, I mean, we'll sort that thing out and we'll get through free agency, draft. I mean, it could be some guys on a roster that, you know, we give opportunities to that get a battle for those type of spots. But, you know, we'll see as time goes on. We have so long to go before we ever even hit the draft. So we'll have a chance to kind of get a feel for where we're at and then adjust off of that.
Adam, you mentioned that familiarity helps, particularly with the defense, but how eye-opening has this experience been when you evaluate the team as an opponent, but now you're evaluating it as a friend?
Yeah, I think it's a unique situation for any kind of coach where you stay in division like this. It's just you're familiar, but you're not. And then you start learning about who guys are, what have they done, how are they in the locker room, how are they on the practice field. You're getting a lot of information about guys that you've never really thought about because you just watched what was on film and you watched what they did and how you were going to prepare for them and if the guy was somebody you were going to account for. And now it's a situation where you're digging deeper and trying to really find out more about what was the locker room like, what are we going to do going forward, you know, to add, improve, or change.
Has that changed your opinion on any players from an evaluation of every game?
There's nobody I can really think of in a negative light. I think there's a lot of guys that it's been more eye-opening as far as, wow, this guy's a lot better player than what I realized, because when you're on offensive side looking at the defense, you're glancing at the other side of the ball and you're talking to the coordinators and just kind of figuring out, like, what's our problem, who do we got to take care of, and then when you get on the other side of the ball and you start evaluating the wide receivers and the tight end and the offensive line, then you start saying, well, I can see myself using this guy in this role, and maybe it's different than what he did before.
To the last one from Connor.
When you kind of mentioned Quincy Enunwa a couple minutes ago there, when you envision him, how you can use him in your offense, well, he's a bigger guy. Can he do some of the similar things that Landry did for you in Miami?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's something that we could always go back and lean on. I don't want to put him in a box. I want him to be able to try to do as many things as he possibly can. And really it's going to be about what are his strengths at the end of the day. We may get through the spring and there might be two other things that he's never done before, or it might be less. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be about more when we get our hands on him, when we get in practice and kind of go through that whole process. And training camp's a whole different animal we got to deal with. Now you start putting the pads on, he becomes a different player.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Coach.